Like, I just remember looking around in my apartment one day, knowing I'm getting evicted, knowing I'm gonna lose the dogs, I know that I'm gonna lose the car, and I still can't stop, and I'm looking around and I'm like, how did I get here? I was kind of born into a broken family. I guess I was misplaced in my home from about 6 months old. I'm separated from my mother, and I ended up getting passed around from home to home. I think I had about 15 different homes before the age of 10. And so kind of lacked a stable environment growing up. And finally at 10 years old, I ended up in what I call my parents' home now. So from 10 to 22, I was raised in a very strict religious environment. Me being the strong-headed person I am, I kind of rebelled against that as I got older. About 15, 16 years old, I started having trouble getting along with people, dealing with authority, those kinds of things. And so I constantly was angry and upset all the time, and I didn't really understand why. As I started to get a little bit older, finally somebody asked me, like, why are you so angry all the time? And it actually made me think, like, why am I so angry all the time? And a lot of it had to do with the abuse that I had gone through before 10 years old. A lot of physical, sexual, mental abuse, and so that made me not trust people. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Like, I was afraid that if I opened up and I talked to anybody that I was going to get hurt. So I just chose not to. And, you know, and so I finally found a youth pastor growing up that I could confide in, and she started trying to help me. And, you know, and that got me through my young adult, teenage/young adult years. And when I was 22, I finally decided to go ahead and move out of my parents' home and go to college. And I wanted something better for myself, and so I chose to do that. I struggled a lot. Like, I thought I was going to get in this new environment and everything was going to be okay, and I was going to finally be able to make my own decisions, but that's not how it ended up. Like, I didn't know that I didn't know how to make decisions. And so I go to college, and my first instinct is to start partying. Like, I wasn't allowed to party when I was growing up. I wasn't allowed to go very many places or interact with very many people outside of our social group. So my goal was to meet as many people as possible and to just party it up and have fun. So my apartment in college became known as the drinking apartment. Everybody knew I had booze. I was one of the few people that could get booze, because most of my classmates were between the ages of 18 to 20. Me being 22 as a freshman, all the freshmen wanted to hang out with me because I had booze. And so that was kind of like my way to connect with people. It was my way to hang out with people and not feel self-conscious or insecure or, you know, those kinds of things. Like, I could hang out, I could drink with them, and everything was cool. So I go to college and I barely get by, you know. I can't say it was necessarily the partying that got in the way of school or whatnot. I think it was mostly the mental health issues I was struggling with. I'd have really high highs and really low lows and constantly suicidal, and I just didn't know what was wrong with me, why I couldn't feel normal. And I remember going to therapy in college and asking the counselor, like, am I always going to feel like this? And he didn't really have an answer for me, you know. He was like, yeah, probably, you know. And that was kind of disheartening. It was very sad to think that I'm going to be stuck like this the rest of my life. And so in my mind, I thought, I'm just going to probably end up killing myself. At the end of the day, I'm probably going to end up dead within a few years of graduating, because I'm not going to be able to handle alone and not having very many friends, not that community. I graduate barely with a 2.0, but I did graduate in 2015, and I move in with one of my college roommates outside of college. She had her own apartment, so we moved in together, and I started working a full-time job, and I was doing the deal, but it didn't take very long for me to feel that crushing burden, you know. As soon as I graduated and moved in with this friend, you know, I started drinking again, and then she had weed all the time in the house. And so then, you know, at first I wasn't super into it, and then I was like, you know what, let's go for it. I'd get so high I couldn't go to work, and I'd be high for like 2-3 days, you know. And so I started missing a lot of work. I started feeling a lot of depression again, and I had to go on FMLA leave for depression because I just couldn't get out of bed. I was in that for 30 days and finally went back to work, and I thought, I know what will fix this. I'm going to get in a relationship. So I found him, and I thought, okay, he's going to fix me. He's going to make me feel okay, and somebody's going to love me, and that's all I need. You know, so I start progressing the relationship faster than it should have. I think we moved in at like 8 months. So we move in together, and the day we move in together, everything changes. Like, he went from being super sweet, gentleman, you know, he's still kind of, he had moments before, but like this was like a complete 180, like just flipped to a completely different person that I didn't even know. So he was very mentally abusive, and we were in a relationship for about 1.5 years. And finally a coworker had met him, and she was like, Sam, it is so much worse than I could have possibly imagined. Like, I thought you were exaggerating in how he treated you. It's actually way worse than what you described. You need to get out now. And so I did. I found an apartment, and within 30 days I was out. I thought, you know, I would have like these crushing feelings, and I didn't. I had no feelings whatsoever towards the situation, but when I moved into my own apartment and I settled in, that's when it all kicked in. And at this point, it's no longer drinking every so often or smoking pot every so often. It's drinking every single day from the time I get home from work to the time I go to bed, blackout drunk, getting sick, and smoking pot constantly. You know, I would bring it to work with me, you know, little cartridge pens because I could get away with it, and then I'd go home and smoke concentrates from a rig. You know, and if anybody knows anything about pot, like that's the strongest stuff they've got. And so I was just blazed 24/7. Just allowed me to numb out just enough to where I wouldn't like hurt myself. I was so incapacitated that people would ask me what was wrong with me because they just didn't understand why I was so like just dead. Found Xanax, and I started popping Xannies to try and calm myself down because again I was struggling with the super high highs and the low lows, and I'd come into work and people would be like, how many energy drinks have you had? And I was like, I haven't had any. And I'd be talking super fast and just very like bouncing all over the place. I had a hard time controlling my emotions. Like I'd lash out and start screaming at people, cussing at people, and that just wasn't not me. There would be times, but I would get out of bed and like I had slept for like 15, you know, between 15 to 18 hours, but I would feel like I had just ran a marathon and didn't get any sleep at all. And so I would wake up like that, but then go to work and be wired and jumping off the walls. It was just that every day, and I didn't understand what was going on, and people started to notice. This was one night I had popped like 7 Xanny bars and started drinking. I knew my body could handle much more than the average person, so I didn't think it would kill me, but I kind of hoped it would. And I blacked out, and I fell, and I hit my face on the bathroom counter full force, just boom. And I don't remember this, but I was told that my best friends, I had called them, I had 2 best friends at the time, and I'd called them, and they said, we'll check on you in the morning, because they couldn't understand anything I was saying. And they came and they found me on the bathroom floor, half conscious, blood everywhere, and they picked me up off the bathroom floor, put me in bed, and my firearm was sitting right next to my bed. And that was put away the night before, and at some point in my blackout I had gotten it out. So at this point my friends are pleading with me to get help. And I don't think I have a problem. I think I just kind of screwed up a little bit and that I'm fine. So my best friend finally convinces me to go to a doctor and get checked out because he's worried. You know, I had this huge black eye, my whole face on this side was swollen, and everybody at work's freaking out because at this time, I forgot to mention that I'm dropping weight like crazy. I used to be 230 pounds. I lost 40 pounds in the first month of my addiction and then 10 pounds each month after that. So at this point, I'm probably like 50, 60 pounds down. My best friend's like, look, you need to go get checked out. And so I go to a psychiatrist and they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder at 27. And so that kind of made sense as to why I could never level out, why my emotions were all over the place. And so I start the medication search and it didn't go well. I was on this medication that made me feel dead inside, so my drinking increased, my pot smoking increased, and I started. And so I go through, you know, about 6 months of that, and I finally give up on the medication search. I couldn't take it anymore, and it's like, I'd rather be manic, at least sometimes I'll feel better, you know what I mean? And I ended up losing my job at the college that I was working at, and I ended up getting a job in a restaurant, and that ended up being catastrophic. Restaurants, you know, are known for having drugs constantly circulating, the partying and all of that, and so that's where I found my place. And I moved in with a drug dealer thinking, great, I'll have, you know, a stash at home all the time, and then I'll be able to go out and party with my friends and I'll have a stash with them all the time. And so that's kind of started my partying cycle again, you know, like I felt like because I was raised in that super religious environment, and I deserve this. I deserve to be able to party now. And so I did, and I was going out to bars and on the weekends, and pretty soon we started throwing parties at my house, and you know, we're bringing in Coke, I'm buying the booze and the weed, and you know, it's just like I got a new roommate at this time again because I had to kick the other one out, and he's bringing in Coke, and they're talking about bringing in, you know, acid and all of this other stuff. And at some point during this partying, everybody starts looking at me funny, and they're like, hey, look, you know, we like to party, but you go a little too far. And so it became apparent that I was using for a different reason other than just wanting to have fun. As fast as the friends came, the friends went. And I was back living by myself, and that friend that I lived with right after college moved back in because she knew I was going to lose my home if she didn't. And so she helped me out. She moved in with me. And at this point, you know, I find Percocets and AKA fentanyl, and I start snorting fentanyl. And that was like, that was finally that feeling I was looking for. I finally found that, like, whew, you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is it. This is the stuff. And so I start snorting those, and then it didn't take long for me to run out of money and go through withdrawals, and that kind of shook me a little bit. It scared me, and so I decided to get into recovery. A friend of mine a year prior had tried to get me to go to a meeting, and I did, and I was like, I don't belong with these people. I don't fit in. I can't relate. At this point, I was shooken up enough to go, hey, where's the next meeting? And I went with him. So I went through 4.5 months clean. I was kind of halfway doing my steps. I wasn't doing the full deal. I kind of took parts of the big book that I felt suited me, and I did those things, and then the things that I thought were a little too much effort or didn't apply to me, I threw those things to the side, and the obsession came back, and it came back with a vengeance. Like, I couldn't get rid of it to save my life. I even told my sponsor, like, I want to use it, and I don't know how to, like, turn it off. Like, I don't know what to do. And I think after 2 weeks of being like that, I went through the whole holidays, my birthday, and all of that, just feeling super depressed. Like, I was miserable still, but I was clean. Finally, the pressure just became too much, and I ended up caving in, and I started again. And this time, I didn't want anything else but the fentanyl. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want Xannies. I didn't want weed. I just wanted to snort my pills. And so I thought, you know, I'll do a couple, and then I'll get back on the wagon. It's all right. You know, it won't be a big deal. And for some reason, I couldn't stop. Like, I did 1, and then I did 2, and 2 turned into 4, and then all of a sudden I'm picking up a batch of 8, and it just spun out of control. And like, I don't remember at what point I lost control, but I did. I ended up, within that time frame, I ended up having another suicide attempt. I had taken 36 fentanyl pills and tried to overdose, and it didn't kill me. I blacked out for 2 days. Since I couldn't kill myself, then I decided I might as well just keep using, and I kept trying to use, and I ended up getting fired from both of my jobs. I ended up losing my apartment. I had 2 dogs, and I had a car, and all of this stuff, and like, my apartment slowly just got emptier and emptier, selling off TV, selling off game systems, and I just remember how lonely and hopeless I felt. Like, I remember talking on the phone with my best friend, like, I can't stop, and I want to stop. Like, I want to stop so bad, but I don't know how. So I ended up eventually running out of money because I was out of jobs. Like, I was pulling out cash advances on my credit cards and all of that stuff to keep myself going, and eventually it all ran dry. And I remember calling around to hospitals, and I was like, I need help. I don't know where to go, and I have no money, and I have no insurance. And they were like, go to CBI. And I Googled CBI, and it was 15 minutes down the street, and called my best friend. I said, hey, I'm going to CBI. Will you watch my dogs for me? And I was out the door in 15 minutes. And I remember showing up to CBI, and I was so desperate to get in that I, like, started panicking because I thought they were closed, and the entrance is around the corner. So I'm standing outside talking to myself, tripping. You know, at some point between my suicide attempt and trying to get sober, like, I was seeing things, I was hearing things, like, I was having, like, hallucinations and stuff. So, like, I must have looked crazy standing outside of CBI talking to myself, and they brought me inside and they got me checked in, and I ended up getting admitted to Detox with flying colors. I just remember sitting in Detox talking to the counselor, and I told her, I said, I am just so done. Like, I just want to give up everything and start over. And she goes, good, you're ready. And I didn't know at the time, but that meant surrender. And I didn't, to my mind, surrender means I lose. My entire life I had been fighting. I had been fighting for everything. The job I had, the car I had, the apartment I had, the friendships I had. Like, I just fought. And I was tired. Like, I had no more fight left in me. And she was like, good, now where do you want to go after here? And they put me in placement. And I ended up showing up to Sunlight of the Spirit in the halfway house. And I didn't want to go to a halfway house. That was not my idea of what I was going to do when I left that place. But I showed up, and little did I know that that place was going to change my life. You know, I show up at Sunlight and I'm angry and I'm, you know, bitter, and I'm yelling at people, and I'm constantly in trouble with staff, and, you know, I'm just struggling. And I looked at a staff member one day, I said, look, I think I need to leave. And she was like, why? I was like, I don't fit in here. Like, I think I've already made a name for myself. Like, I was used to in the past, if I screwed up and made mistakes in the beginning, that I could never live it down. But she said, no, honey, that's your disease talking. Like, just stay. Just stay. And I'm like, all right. These people didn't look at me with judgment. They didn't look at me and judge me for my actions in the beginning. Like, I remember one of the girls walked up to me and she goes, you're so new, you're so cute. And I'm flipping out because, you know, it's hot in my apartment and I'm going through withdrawal still. And you know, so I'm yelling and I'm freaking out, and she doesn't respond to me in the way that I respond to her. And that took me back. I was like, whoa. I had another staff member come along, you know, like a couple months later and take me under her wing, and like started taking me to meetings with her, and she would, you know, talk to me about stuff. And like, she was one of the few people in my life that like truly listened and like looked at me with compassion and love. And like, I could go to her about anything, and she never looked at me the way that other people had. People would look at me for either the face value emotions that they would see, or they would look at me through the lens of my past, or what they wanted me to be and what I wasn't. This person just looked at me for who I was in the moment, and like accepted that that's who I was. And they were okay with that. And like, I'd never experienced that kind of love before. And the love that I experienced from these people in this halfway house that I didn't want to be at was just amazing. And it slowly changed my heart. I stopped yelling at people. I stopped flipping out and getting angry at people. And I started to look at people the same way. I started to look at people and try to understand them a little bit. Try to understand why they're acting the way that they are, and know that that person is hurting on the other side. Like, that's a human being that's hurting. And when I learned that, and I learned that from those girls, then that made me a little bit more useful to others. And so that's kind of like where, like, my goal is to get, is like, I want to get to a place where I can turn around and I can help somebody else, and I can look at them with that same love and that same compassion that I was given in the beginning. And, you know, I have been living at that halfway house for about 8.5 months, and I learned how to do a proper amends with people, and how to like actually like sit down and have a conversation with somebody in a healthy manner, and not to put people on a pedestal like I used to do that, like this is the greatest person in the world, and then I would also look at somebody else with judgment and put them down. And I don't live the same life that I used to. I don't have that crushing burden of like anxiety and depression and fear and all of those things. Like, I can actually like live life and not be afraid anymore, and not know that I don't have to fight anymore. Like, I've learned a lot from those girls at the house, and I've learned a lot through this program. My sponsor took me through my steps, and you know, in going through the steps, like, I had gone through them before, but kind of halfway did it. Like, when I went through it this time, like, I put 100% effort into it. Slowly but surely, like, I would go and I would do something that sounded stupid, and it would work out, and I'd learn something from it, and I'm like, whoa! And so, like, I just started to learn that, like, okay, no matter how stupid I think it is, I just need to go do it. And following those suggestions given to me by my sponsor, by the girls at the house, by the staff members, one of the best friends that picked me up off the bathroom floor, she had stepped away in my addiction, and she had walked away, and she was done. Like, she didn't want anything to do with me. And when I came into recovery the first time, she still didn't have anything to do with me, but when I came back the second time, was there in 30 days. You know what I mean? And I was like, whoa, it was 4.5 months clean the last time, and you're back in 30 days now? And I asked her why, and she said, because last time I could tell that you regretted getting sober. You didn't want it. And this time I could tell that you were done. You were desperate. You needed it to work. And so I came back to support you the second time because I knew you were ready. I told her, I said, you know, I was so mad at you for leaving before. Like, I felt like you had abandoned me, but I understand why you left now. Like, I'm not mad anymore. And And she's like, well, I left because I was angry, and I don't even know that I had a right to be angry. And I was like, you absolutely did have a right to be angry. You had a right to be angry because you have to mourn the loss of that friend. Like, I went from being your best friend to a monster. And she goes, you know what, you're right. I was mad at you because you were dead, and my best friend was dead, and you were the one that killed her. And that, like, hit me hard. And it completely changed my perspective. Like, I could only see the tunnel vision of, like, my perspective on things, and everything's kind of skewed because of the drugs and the alcohol, but like when she put it in that way for me, it helped me see how she felt for a minute. I had never seen it that way before. In my mind, like, I'm still here, I'm not dead, you know, but in reality I was dead. Like, the person that I was before is gone. What I try to do today is I try to be the best version of who I am, and not be that person that I was in drugs and alcohol, because that person was a monster. The person I'm trying to be today is, like, my goal is for that person to be such a long distance memory that nobody could ever see that that person ever existed. That's my goal. Like, I want to live a life where people could not tell that I was ever a drug addict or an alcoholic. And so that's just kind of how I want to be today. And so how I do that is I stay connected with my family, my AA family. I go to meetings every single day, and I call my sponsor every single day. I'm going through my steps for the second time. I stay connected. I have sponsees in the book, and I absolutely love them. And working with them reminds me to stay on track. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be having a rough time, and then I'll go work with a sponsee, and woo, you know, if I feel so much better. And like, in working with them, I realize things about myself that I need to fix. And like, if it wasn't for this program, I doubt I'd be sitting here today. I probably would be dead. So I am super grateful for this program and the people that have reached out to me in that halfway house. And I definitely have a lot better life today than I did back then, even with the car, the apartment, the dogs. The physical stuff doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Like, I put so much stock in that stuff, and it doesn't mean anything. Like, I don't have any of this stuff back. The life that I live today is so much better than it ever was back then.
DetoxToRehab wants to help as many people as possible, and do it the right way. Please subscribe, comment, and like our channel. Thank you for watching.